I'm writing a paper on how to make a comic. It was a project I had to do in a class last semester, so I needed a bunch of sources for it as I worked on it because we were also writing. We were like writing the narration, what our character said, the dialogue, what was happening, all that nice jazz, and we also had to draw everything, but that's a different topic. The first place I looked for information for the project was I needed some inspiration to write everything, and so I looked at Scott McCloud because he's also scatterbrained like me, and he just kind of writes whatever. And I really liked his visit to our class and to Georgia Southern, and I really liked his book. So I had a personal connection to him, which is why he popped up in my mind first. It's one thing to be told a guy is great or a source is good, and it's another to see them in action. So that's why I went there first. He actually gave me his email when he visited, and he signed my hello color scheme no when he signed my book. So that was really cool, and like I said before, that made me think if I'm sorry if I'm getting scatterbrained. It asked me if I wanted to change the performance of the computer. Uh, Scott McCloud. Bleh. Like I said, personal attachment, rambling. I had begun the process by emailing him. He emailed me back pretty quickly. He just let me know like all the stuff that he already covered in his book, like iconography, symbolism, stuff as simple as like page frames being important to comics. It was really cool, and because he was telling me this himself and not like just reading from a dictionary and it wasn't a professor reading a lecture, I remembered it more. It made me feel like he actually cared that I was learning. And I know professors do care, but I just always get when it's a one-on-one deal, it's way more important for me. I remember it more. It's also I attach sentimentality to it. Uh, so that was how I began the process, and that gave me way more information than I intended it for it to because, like me, Scott McCloud's kind of a chatterbox, and I like it. I also like that I can attach memories to how I did the research. That's why this project stands out, even though I'm sure I did like five last semester. Uh, for obviously writing a comic book, you're gonna look up terms like comics, books, visual information, graphics, stuff like that for like using stuff like Google and Bing, and I mostly use Google. I don't really like Microsoft. But there was a place called the Comic Book Database, and it is a .com website, so its information may not be the most reliable. But why I trusted it was the information was added by like the higher ups at like Marvel and DC and Image, Vertigo, like because they're the people who actually make comics, so their information should be pretty reliable. I mean, they're basically the president of comics. So I thought their sources were reliable. They had a bunch of writers kick in and teach you things. I think Scott McCloud even had a few articles on comicbookdatabase.com. Obviously, I saved that source. It was super helpful. It basically gave me everything I needed. Between that, the email interview with Scott McCloud, and his books, Understanding and Creating Comics, along with along with going to the lecture he provided for me at comic book writing class, and when he visited the campus a semester ago, I basically had everything I needed. There was the entire process of trying to actually draw, and I'm not a good drawer, so that's just an entirely different conversation, but that was painful and awful. Uh, I kept up with all the information I got. I was using a recorder while talking to him, and I let him know I didn't want to like get in legal trouble. But I basically saved all of his texts and kept the recordings on a Google Drive. It's just my personal one that's also connected to my student account. It's God bless Google Drive. That's how I keep track of everything. I know some people like papers, but I mostly stick to digital. Uh, at least for keeping up with sources. Um, yeah, Google Drive's pretty much my lifesaver. Uh, After all this, I didn't really have anything else I thought I needed. as far as information goes, because it doesn't get much better than getting it from an actual comic book writer on how to write comics when his most famous comic book is literally called Understanding and Writing Comics. So I thought these were all pretty good sources, but just for a last bit of advice, I talked to two other people. My roommate, he's really into comics and he's actually proposed drafts to Marvel that they're thinking of using, which was really cool. So I thought, I mean, he's a source I'm next to 24/7. We play games, we hang out, we do everything. So I talked to him a lot, and he's also read like probably hundreds, if not 1,000 comic books. So he could definitely, at the very least, point me in a direction of beloved comic books and teach me the basics. And then I talked to my professor because, like my roommate, he's also been in the comics. I actually ran into him at a convention. That was really cool. And he was a very big help. Between the two of them, I'd say they helped me about as much as Scott McCloud did, which is very awesome. Uh, as a final word for this project, basically I used Google Drive. I got an actual source that I trusted. Uh, Going off on the side just for a bit, I know I'm supposed to trust sources from .org, .edu, and .gov, but sometimes I feel like even though they're supposed to be neutral, they can be written by biased parties and biased sources. And my dad's a lawyer. He taught me to always suspect, not like distrust, but always suspect and question everything. So that kind of played into it. And it might have just been my upbringing that I focus on sentimentality more than anything else. But if I actually care about the source I'm getting it from, I usually trust the information. Not the most professional thing for an upperclassman to say, but whatever. Anyway, that's, yeah, final summary. Google Drive. Get a source you trust and that you think your professor would trust. And talk to as many people as you can. Just because you think you have all the information, you can still learn more. And that would be my final thoughts.